In the painting, we see a jester, a fool, with his hand covering his face. The meaning of this painting is a deep one, and the question is what is behind his hand, not just in a literal sense, but in a spiritual sense. This is a painting with many meanings, a painting with many interpretations, and in this video we're going to be going over a number of them. This painting was made in 1500. It's called The Laughing Fool by Jacob Cornelisz van Oostsanen. You can see a laughing fool clearly presented. A man in a costume with his hand covering his face. But what does this painting mean? What is behind his grin? What is behind his covered face? Well, that's what we're going to try and answer in tonight's video. The interesting thing with art is it's always open for interpretation, and you might look at this and have a different opinion completely to what I think. At the same time, I've tried to go over a number of different understandings that I can think of when it comes to looking at this interesting painting. Now again, this one was created in 1500, but it still has a massive impact today. For me, on initial inspection, I find this painting to be a very interesting one. We can see the overall dim lighting of the scene, with the creepy figure really being the main focus of the image. At the same time, I do find the fool to be somewhat creepy, with his sort of weird stare, the way he's looking towards the angle of us. And then we've got his hand covering his face. Now, breaking this part of the image down, the painting down, what could the fool actually symbolize? Well, you've got to understand one thing, and that is during this time, during the medieval and Renaissance art period, we knew that fools were commonly associated with representing human stupidity and vanity. So this could be seen as a symbol of moral blindness, a symbol of ignorance, and a symbol of people just not being attentive. We also see him with an exaggerated grin, and that's one of the things that I could take away. This grin almost looks sort of forced. I mean, look at the way his face is, look at the way his mouth is, right? This looks extremely exaggerated, and again, it helps the figure to just come across overall creepy, in my personal opinion. So the exaggerated grin in and of itself could suggest mindless amusement. So he's laughing at something without truly understanding. And this is something which I also took away from the wrinkles and somewhat the hand covering, right? Because what does a hand covering symbolize generally? Well, it could symbolize the fact he's trying to cover his face from something, but if you notice one thing, his eye pops through. We can see both of his eyes, which means he can see whatever he's looking at too. So his hand is covering his face, but it's not exactly covering his eyes. So it's not like he's ultimately reluctant to look at what he is seeing. But again, he still brings his hand to his face to cover it somewhat. So this could represent a few things. It could represent the fact that he is essentially blind to a number of things. He's blind to what's going on. He's laughing at things without understanding it. But also think about it on a deeper level. A lot of art from this period has a lot of subconscious meanings, and a lot of art does anyway, but particularly from this period we see a lot of moral messaging in terms of art, and that's one of the things that we see a lot when we look at art from this period. So could this potentially represent how people mock reality ignorantly? People fail to acknowledge their own flaws whilst having such judgment to cast on everybody else, because his hand is covering himself. His hand is not covering the thing he's looking at. He's not afraid to stare forwards. He's not afraid to look directly, in the context of this, what would be at the camera angle, and from his angle, whatever he's looking at. He's not afraid to look at it entirely, but he does have some reluctance. It's like this grin's almost forced. You know, like I say, this smile to me does not look entirely authentic. So there's that angle of it, and again, this could potentially tie into what a fool symbolizes, because you've got to think about it in this way as well. What does a fool symbolize? Well, obviously it's a number of things. It's someone who acts relatively unintelligent, but again, it also could symbolize it in the context of this painting, that this guy's a fool because he doesn't realize that the joke is him. He's dressed up as a fool. He's dressed up as a fool, you know, an ancient, or I should say medieval jester. But he's the joke. That's why he's in the fool costume. It's essentially his job in this context. So it's like he's laughing. He's covering himself. But perhaps at the same time, he might know he's the fool. And this could be something. Maybe he's come to this stage of realization because, again, he's not genuinely, in my opinion, looking too happy. This looks forced, it looks exaggerated. And him covering himself, maybe this is part of it. Maybe he is looking at the way that the world is, looking at the way that society is. And again, he is the fool. He might know this, and he might be just trying to cover himself out of shame, out of upset. It's a very, very interesting painting. Now, again, a lot of paintings of this time, they've got subconscious messaging, they have religious interpretations too. Under that context, I think this could be seen as a moral warning. We know that around 1500, when this painting was created, Europe was heavily shaped by Christian morality. The fool often symbolizes sinful behavior and the rejection of wisdom, which again would somewhat make sense in this context, because if you think about it, he's laughing at something. He's laughing at something, yet turning... Well, he's looking towards it, but turning away from it. Because look at his face angle, right? His face is really pointed in this sort of angle, sort of to the right of the screen. But his eyes are pointing more center/left. So clearly whatever he's focusing on is this way, but he's physically turned away from it. His physical body is essentially pointing right-bound, whereas his eyes are pointing left-bound or center-bound. So it's like his body's turning away from something and his eyes can't be taken away from it. So in relation to religion, maybe this is someone who's turned away from God, who's become hedonistic and sinful. His body's obviously moving towards the dark side. I mean, I know there is dark on either side of this painting, but there's also this thing in the background which I can't entirely understand what it is. I'm kind of at a loss as to what this might be in the background. But again, whatever it is, he is turning towards it physically, and his eyes and his spirit are moving away from it. At the same time, you are seeing this forced grin on his face. Maybe he's coping with the situation he's in, or maybe he knows he's doing wrong. Maybe he's got this like hedonistic, as I say, grimace. I want to call it a grimace. Maybe he's got this like hedonistic grimace as he looks towards a thing he knows he should be focusing on, which on the context of this may be God, maybe religion, maybe morally virtuous behavior, and in reality, he's a fool. He's a fool, he's turned away from it. Now again, this is from the interpretation perhaps of the time, because people who were, morally ignorant or religiously ignorant may have been seen in such a way. So he's dressed up as a fool, his body language is turning away, turning towards the dark, and most of his face is in the shade. At the same time, he makes an effort to cover his face, so perhaps that does tie into it all. Now, there's so many messages from this. Perhaps we could see it as those who laugh at truth, and again, truth in this context being religion, are the ones who are truly spiritually lost, floating through life in a meaning that they don't understand, and that could represent his, fake-looking laugh or fake-looking smile. Now, you could also see this as a mirror to society, because this man, this character, is a fool. He's dressed up as a fool. That is literally his definition. So, we see him as a fool. You and me right now, we're looking at this as ourselves, and we're looking at this guy as a fool. But in the context of the period, in the context of the artist's, perhaps, view, maybe we're the fool. Because maybe this man, this character, isn't a character. Maybe it's a mirror into how the artist saw society, people, and perhaps even himself. Because think about this, right? We can see that this person is looking directly at us, look, almost staring into your soul. Now, what he might have been looking at perhaps through the other angle of the screen, or I should say the painting, if you want to view it that way, we don't know. Only the artist can 100% interpret what that was supposed to be. But what I'm trying to say is, this guy, this character, this fool, is looking directly at us. Look at that sort of soulless stare in his eyes, especially this one. Is this a symbol of deception? But we'll get to that in a second. But what I'm trying to say is, it's looking at us. He's looking at us. Looking into our eyes, looking at our face. Almost like this is to symbolize something. We can't take our eyes off his face. We can't take our eyes off his stare. And it is somewhat unnerving. This guy's face to me looks somewhat creepy. But think about it. This is an almost confrontational look. Like I say, I can't look at this without it feeling somewhat creepy, to be honest. The way his face is painted, the sort of caricature style of how he looks, I can't kind of take my gaze away from it in terms of looking at this painting. So, is this sort of a symbol which forces question? This is a confrontational gaze. It's a very judgmental stare looking directly at us. Again, the eyes look relatively soulless and direct, yet the face is laughing. It's deception, possibly, but also it's someone looking directly into our eyes, making us question, what do we know about this guy? Where are we in relation to him? Is this just a reflection of how the artist sees us? Is this just a reflection of how we see ourselves? Because going back to the prior 2 points about religion and also ignorance, you know, a lot of people, not even necessarily in a religious context, but in terms of just walking around the world and not being as attentive to things as perhaps they should, a lot of people are not switched on, in a lot of ways. And given the context of this painting, given the stare, given the creepiness of the painting, given the directness of the painting, given the smile, okay, tie it all together, is this just a mirror of us? Just walking through life, not paying attention, not really caring. And we like to think it's not, so we look at this person and see, he's a fool because he doesn't even know of his own ignorance. I think that's one of the ways you really can interpret this. Now, I also want to move on to another point here, which is looking in a number of ways at this as potentially deception. Now, why do I say deception here? Because what you're seeing in the image and the body language of the person are arguably not the same thing. Because I want you to focus on the narrow details here. This man is smiling. He's got a smile on his face. His eyes look relatively soulless and staring. He's staring intently whilst laughing. Now, these are 2 things which you often do not see. When you start laughing, of course, you might close your eyes. You're going to be in a more relaxed state. Yeah, this guy's stare is absolutely intense. His face is being covered by his hand. It's being obscured by his hand. And that is a word which in this context I think matters a lot. His face is being obscured by his hand. We can't see what's behind his hand, and we can't see what is obviously on that part of his face. Now, at the same time, one of the things that I notice about this painting, and this is perhaps its style, I think that is something as well, but it might be a hidden detail. I see this hand as being ever so slightly raised. Now, again, that might just be the artist's style, or to be fair, a lot of people, including myself, have a challenge in art drawing hands. It is very hard, or painting hands for that matter, but maybe this is not a mistake. Maybe this is not a art style entirely. I mean, it is, but maybe this is more of okay, there's something behind his hand, and we can't see it. And there's something that appears to be raised behind his hand, because this part of his hand looks somewhat well connected to his face, but this part to me doesn't. Just based on the tonality of the art. What is behind his hand? And why is this man trying to deceive us? Now, again, going back to this perhaps in a moral or religious standpoint of this time, think about it, right? This guy's face is turning towards the dark. It's turning towards whatever this red thing is. It is looking directly at us. He's dressed up as a fool. Now, also, I want to take a new meaning at this point onto the fool costume. Because what is a fool? Well, a fool is essentially, to my knowledge at this time, a court jester. Someone who's there to be laughed at. Someone who's a quite innocuous, funny character. But what if this isn't true? What if this is the deception? Because the fool, he's an idiot. He's, like I say, he's a court jester. He's a joke, basically. But what if that in and of itself is viewing it wrong? What if this guy's actually truly deceptive? Because we can't see his hair. We can't really see all of his face. And he's leaning towards the dark side with this red in the background. Especially judging this through a religious context. What if this guy himself is an interpretation or character or caricature of the devil or of evil in that regard? Because think about it, he's turning towards the dark. He looks like a fairly innocuous and funny character. This guy's got nothing wrong with him. He's a court jester. He's a character from this context in this time that we all know. We all like to laugh at the court jester, right? Yet he's looking at us with his creepy eyes, with his covered face, with his fake looking smile. Is this a man being authentic? Because if he is, why does he need to cover his face yet stare intently at us? That's not two things which humans do really very often. You're not going to be smiling like that or laughing like that and staring. It's just, it comes across very fake and inauthentic, irrespective of the time period. So he's looking at us in this way. I think this could also be a representation of the devil or amorality or whatever you want to say from this time period. He's leaning in towards the dark. His body's leaning in towards the dark. He's got this red thing behind him. It's weird. And the purity of this darkness, because this is a relatively pure background from what I can tell, it's got some marks, but this is a 500-year-old painting, so what do you expect? But minus that, this, I would have imagined back in the day, would have been pure black, and this obviously would have never been pure black. This has got something in the background. Is he leaning towards this thing? And again, you look a bit further at this creepy thing. I assume this is part of his costume, actually, my bad. But you look at this creepy thing in the background, and that's the next thing that ties into my theory on sort of the sinisterness of this, because whatever this creepy thing in the background is on this stick, I assume it would have also been part of his costume, this part as well. My bad, I forgot to notice or note that part earlier on. But yeah, that is a little bit scary in and of itself. Now, I understand this might have been part of the jester's equipment, but, it still looks very weird. And again, him turning towards this thing's in the background. It's also, think about this as well. This is also staring intently at us. This is, in terms of eye angle, to me, this is looking exactly as strongly as the jester is. So that thing in the background, in and of itself, is very creepy. Now, I still don't understand why he's turning towards the things over here, this creepy thing, this red. And again, whilst I know this now might be part of his costume, potentially, it's still red, it's still creepy, and he's still turning towards it, so, yeah. It's like, this one's a dark red, this one's a yellow. Maybe that's just me overanalyzing that, but I think that could be a big part of it, in my opinion. Now, at the same time, his laughter could be a symbol of madness. It's a wide, unnatural grin. Like I say, for me, it feels very unsettling, and you could see it almost as a maniac-style grin. This could suggest that it's insanity rather than genuine joy. Like I say, this is not the reaction of a person who is truly happy. It's not a realistic way to move your face or your body at all. Now, the Fool could also represent the line between humour and madness, joy and delusion, and essentially blind happiness and insanity. Again, morals at this time were perhaps different to what they are today. So, perhaps you could have seen it in this context during that time, right? Court jesters were the only people at this time who could criticize authority without punishment. And with that also being something to pay attention to, this is one of the only characters who we can see in this light, because the Fool could represent the truth behind the absurdity. And whilst we therefore see this person as insane, and like I say, I took a number of different angles on this, and I try and do that with all the paintings that we look at. We can look at this guy as insane, he looks crazy, whatever. What if he's the one that actually knows? And maybe that's why he has to turn himself away from it. And I know that's a direct contrast to the point that I made earlier, but like I say, I like to make at least 3 or 4 scenarios before looking at any painting. So, yeah, he's one of the only people who can laugh at these sort of things without punishment. He's a comic. So he could potentially be laughing towards the elite, the absurdity of it, and the way that people and society was at this time, or maybe even us as the viewer. Now, this, in this context, brings a new light to it, because under that guise, the Fool could be the only one who can actually see what's going on clearly. We initially were looking at this as, well, this guy's the Fool, he doesn't know what's going on. What if he's the one that truly understands? And what if that's why he has to turn away? What if that's why he's staring at us so intently? What if he's the one that knows things that we actually do not? It could be the case, and we just do not know. At the same time, think about it in the realm of perhaps vanity and materialism, because his expression could symbolize someone who's amused by trivial things. This could represent people who are focused on status, wealth, and pleasure. It also suggests that there is a shallow existence which is disconnected from deeper meaning. And again, this is something, if not perhaps more prevalent in our society today. People just focused on things and the acquisition of things and the chasing of things, money, things. But yeah, so he's looking directly at us, maybe making us question that, or even making the viewer of this time question these things. Now, the fool here is the direct look of this person. He's obviously visibly a fool. What if he's not, though? What if his outfit is deceptive? Deceptive in the form of looking like the devil, or deceptive in the form of looking creepy, looking evil, looking soulless to an extent. But maybe he's the one that truly understands, and maybe that's where his soul, his character, his emotions gone. He's dressed up as a fool. Maybe he's forcing this smile because he understands the way that the world works, or the way that the world worked at this time. The greed, the delusion, the deception, the turning away from God, perhaps, through the angle of this time. And, we view this guy initially as a fool, but that's what I like about this painting, because by the end of it, we can sort of bring it back. Maybe he is not the fool. Maybe he's the genius. Maybe he's the one that truly knows. And maybe that's why he's covering his face. He has to be arrogant. He has to be ignorant to it. It's the only way he can get through this world. In a world of, material, status, and ignorance. Maybe he's the one that truly understands, and we, as the viewer, don't. And that's where this painting becomes somewhat ironic, because viewing it through that angle to conclude, who's the real fool here? You want to say him? What if he's the one that actually knows? He's been in the court, he's been around wealthy people, entertaining them. Now he understands that it's not worth it. Or at least it's not right. And the theme here, or the irony here, might be the question of who actually is the fool. Because it very well might be us. Anyway, it's a very interesting video, guys. This is a 500-year-old painting. It still makes us think about who we are. That in and of itself is a very fascinating thing. The artist is clearly very talented to be able to do that. But yeah, I really like this one, and I really like what it perhaps shows us now. Again, you can view this in all different ways, because bringing this into our images today, 500 years later, people are still distracted, entertained, and unaware of the things going around them. They've lost connection even further, I would say, since the period of this, with perhaps spirituality and the things that arguably matter. And again, this ties into today's society in relation to the modern distractions and meaninglessness that many people feel in life, and perhaps the awakening that many people get to when they understand these things. And that's perhaps viewing it a lot deeper than maybe it is, but I like to view these paintings from many different angles, so that's one of the ones I've come up with for this one. Thank you so much for your time, guys, and I hope I'll see you again soon.